Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Right Space podcast. I am your host, Robyn-Lee Samuels, and with me today is a lovely guest, a business owner in her own right, someone I met on LinkedIn. And I think years ago we kind of had a conversation about things that I can't remember right now. But since then, I've kind of followed her career, followed her business on LinkedIn as she posts about healthy mental health in the workspace, and advocating for people to kind of treat their employees better. So, me to welcome Kulani Shiluvane. Welcome.
Hey, Robyn. Hey, Robyn's listeners. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
You're most welcome. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so as you said, I am a business owner. I run my own HR and labor law consultancy. We're based out of Johannesburg, but we operate nationally as well as within the SADC region. Yeah, I've been doing this for the past couple of years now, but I suppose we'll probably get into that as the conversation goes a little bit deeper. I'm also a mom to a neurodiverse 12-year-old. Guys, I kept somebody alive for 12 years, very proud of myself. And yeah, just an overall just happy human being. Love people sometimes, not always. Anybody in HR and labor law will tell you. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's a lovely packed nutshell. So I noticed your business turned 7 this year. Congratulations on that. And you've
Thank
managed not only
you.
to keep a human alive, but a business thriving.
Talk about an
Oh,
overachiever, guys. I'm such an overachiever. Yay me.
forget about the what do they call it? A lady boss who's just out there running the world. You're like, no, I'm gonna bridge the two. I will do all the things and succeed.
This is why I'm tired.
My word. To be fair, most business owners are tired.
Very true.
Some just bring the tired on themselves, and others
Yeah.
have responsibilities. Um, yeah, that's cool. What got you into like working in HR and the work that you do?
Oh my goodness, it was actually it wasn't like a direct line, to be completely honest with you. I actually was in the operations management space. And when I worked for my former employer, we had to effect a change management. And I was head of operations at the time, who was also looking after HR. So then what had happened is that we didn't do the change management very, very well. And I think for the first time in my career, I actually realized how, not that I didn't know, but just how crucial it is to sort of like effect these particular organizational changes well, because we did go on to lose really, really good people, and that had really dire consequences for the organization. And I mean, we managed to bounce back, but I feel like it's one of those things, had I paid more attention to, it was something that we could have avoided. And this also just stemmed from a place where, certain policies and procedures were not in place. And then that's when I thought, okay, if we are struggling in this particular area, there must be similar businesses of similar sizes that are also struggling in this particular area. And that's when I started Shiluba as a side hustle. And then a couple of years later, then took the leap to actually then go on to full sort of like running it as an actual business. And it's evolved from then, because when we initially started, we were an HR policy and procedure and SOP development consultancy. And now we are a full circle HR and labor law consultancy. So we offer the full circle of HR, full circle of HR, of labor law services as well.
Okay, so let's park there for a second. You said a lot of
Sure.
um, acronyms like the HR SOP and documentation development. What is that? Because I think sometimes, especially like large agencies and things like that, they would know to have these things in place. But sometimes
Yeah,
when you have like a solopreneur or someone who's starting out and they're starting to
yeah,
build a team, they might
yeah.
not know what all of that is. Could you like dive into that and why it's important, perhaps for someone who's growing a team or has an established team to just like look back and make sure that they have those ducks in a row?
Yeah, sure. So policies and procedures as well as SOPs. SOPs are stands for standard operating procedures. And these are documents that you would have in place that would tell people in an organization how to go about doing certain things, right? They're different for different organizations, etc. And not all organizations or not all industries will have SOPs, but all organizations and all businesses should have policies and procedures in place. So, a policy and procedure on how we're going to recruit, how we're going to remunerate our people, what is our policy on procedure in terms of working hours and leave, etc., etc., etc. All of these things are legislated, but companies also need to have these documents in place that speak uniquely to their particular offering as an employer. So, as much as you might have the Labor Relations Act tells us, that you are entitled to so many days of leave. That's the bare minimum. That's not stopping organizations from saying, okay, instead of the 15 days for people who work 5 days, we're going to give them 21. So it's those kinds of documentations that are very, very important. They are important because they are the what is the word that I'm looking for? They're the blueprint on how your organization will run. It also draws a lot of how what the culture would look like, right? So organizations that are wanting to be more employee centric will have policies around leave, etc., that take into consideration that, for a mom that just had a baby, maybe 4 months maternity leave is not enough, and maybe we're going to give them six. Those kinds of things. So that's what those things are, and that's why it's important to have them. In terms of things like a recruitment policy, tells you, how we're going to go about the recruitment process and how we're going to best find talent in our organization. That way it's organized, it's haphazard. It also allows a entrepreneur who's building a team to then let the people coming in know how to go about doing certain things. That way then you don't have to run everything yourself, because the blueprint on how to go about doing certain things in an organization is there. It's documented, it's a living breathing document. And then as and when things change in an organization, those policies and procedures and SOPs can also be updated.
That's really cool. So it is like you mentioned, the blueprint, and then as you build, you look back to that blueprint, to make
A
sure that
hundred
you're
percent
still in alignment with whatever decisions you made at the
yes,
time
a
of
hundred
creating
percent
those.
a hundred
And
percent yes.
well, since you've been in this industry, has there ever been something that really surprised you in terms of like what's something that's like really shocked you since you've started working
I'm in
in this space?
HR. I deal with humans. There's zero surprises. Nothing shocks me anymore. Honestly, I've stopped being
Oh gosh.
shocked. But I think for me, what shocks me and will continue to shock me is not necessarily things that happen, but it is how both employers and employees don't understand how their relationship needs to be one that is mutually beneficial. One cannot
Mm.
exist without the other. And for me, when people don't get that and I have to sort of like justify it to them, that still takes me aback a little bit. Because, in the work that I do, I always say that we need to build organizations with people and an organization that understands that they need each other. Do they need each other forever? Probably not. But whatever time period they're in a relationship, and it's exactly that. It's a relationship. It might be an unequal relationship. The power dynamic might be a bit warped, but it is still a relationship. So I think for me, that's probably the one thing that I'm like, how am I still having to explain this to people in 2024?
That's interesting. And it
Yeah.
sounds really stressful as well. Um, Having to bridge those gaps or communicate that and make sure that like people are understanding and
Yeah, yeah, and also in in a job market, and in a job market like South Africa, just also understanding some of the nuances, if that makes sense, let me make a typical one that probably just irritates me the most, is that you can't expect all graduates to come out of varsity with a car. Hello. Some of them are on
is that
NASFAS,
an
some of them.
expectation?
No, I mean, in some cases, yes, it's like, oh, we want you to have your own transport. And you can't, and I'm like, do you understand that's actually discriminatory? You can ask people to have reliable forms of transport, but you can't ask them to have their own car. It's actually legislated. But, that doesn't mean that people are like, oh, but, and I'm like, "Mm, guys, do you understand the history? Do you understand the nuances that is our country? And I suppose maybe
Mm,
sometimes it's just people not being fully aware of the actual realities of some graduates, or some, not even graduates, just people in general in our country, if that makes sense, And not everybody's going to leave varsity with a driver's license either. Some people
yeah,
are grown before, or have their first job and have been in their job for maybe the first 3-4 years before they're able to obtain a driver's license.
yeah. Those are very like real issues
Mm,
that
mm,
people go through. And I suppose when you're creating a like spec document or like a job ad or something like that, you're just
100%.
thinking of the most convenient ways to communicate this thing without thinking about like the candidates
A hundred
as
percent.
people.
A
That's
hundred percent.
interesting.
100%. Yeah.
Uh, Now, given all of the stress that and the irritation that you face, what part of your job do you enjoy most? Because you clearly do like what you do. You're passionate about it.
Love what I do. I love what I do. What part of my job do I enjoy the most? I think for me, it's the strategy part, having to put together some kind of, people strategy around for an organization. That's always, I love that, because it allows me to, impart onto the organization some of the realities and the things that they might not think about. It allows me to talk about things that I care about the most in organizations, things like mental well-being, and ensuring that people are working in organizations and workplaces that allow them to have psychological safety, but also creating within reason, happy and healthy with the, working environments as well. So the strategy part for me is always really exciting. I love facilitating, learning and development, skills development is one of my favorite things to do, to be in a room with people, because people always think that the facilitator is the one that's imparting knowledge, but I've always walked away from a facilitation having gained something myself. So it gives me an opportunity to learn. I love it even more with youth, because they keep me young. I learn all the lingo, the riz, and all of this stuff that, as millennials, I might not be too clued up on. I know all the Gen Zs hate the thumbs up emoji on like a text or a Teams or whatever, and I always just roll my eyes to be like, I'm just saying okay. I'm not saying go away, in a not a nice way as they think. So those are the two probably aspects of my jobs that I enjoy the most. Yeah.
the facilitation thing is
Mhm.
like, it's really a kind of a hack, because the better you are at facilitation, the the less talking you actually do. And I think that's something that people don't necessarily notice.
If you're
And
talking a lot,
afterwards, everyone's afterwards, people come to you and they're like, "That was so amazing! I learned so much." Meanwhile, you did very little.
100%. 100%. It is such a hack and it's such a fine balance as well. And I always say, the facilitation is probably it's a balance between the content and sharing the content, but also building rapport and building that rapport quick, fast, and in a hurry with the audience, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so quick, fast, and in a hurry. How do you
Yeah.
typically do that?
I suppose for me, it's always understanding the room that I'm walking into first, understanding, is it executives, middle management? Is it, sort of like graduates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then drawing from my own experiences, life experiences, and then also finding common ground with the room. We always focus on our differences and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what? Inherently, human beings, we're all similar. And, we have our differences, but we also have so many touch points where we can build rapport and find a common ground. And that's how I do it, is establishing a common ground that we can all sort of base the relationship for the next couple of hours, next couple of days on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm.
Let's shift
Yeah.
a little into speaking about, like you mentioned, one of the parts that you like about your job is highlighting like mental health awareness within
Mhm.
the workspace, and creating specific word you used, um, creating like healthy work environments. So
Yeah.
can you talk us through that? Like, what does a healthy work environment look like? And break it down in like the on-site space, and
Mhm.
also for
Mhm.
like remote only companies. Um, and how would you go about, like, okay, let's start there and then we'll move on to the next part.
I don't, yeah, sure. I don't think there's necessarily a difference between the on-site and off-site, because psychological safety and mental well-being within the organization is going to come from the culture of the organization. And that culture is not a tangible thing. It's something that the English is missing me right now, so sorry. But
It's fine, it happens.
but it's something that you build, but you build it intangibly, if that makes sense, right? So
Mm.
I think to be able to have a happy, healthy work environment, first there needs to be psychological safety within the organization, right? This means that people need to feel like they are safe to express themselves, be themselves, ask questions, impart their ideas, etc., etc., etc. It also needs to be an environment where the leadership, the people that lead people, understand how to lead people, right? And lead people as a group, but also lead people as an individual, right? Because you might be leading a team, but a team is also made up of individuals. So you need to be able to do that, and you need to do it well. What tends to happen, and what we see a lot in organizations, is that people managers are promoted into being a people manager because they have the technical skill, right? And I always say that people that are technically apt seldomly, and I say seldomly because there are those unicorns that exist, make good people managers. And what organizations need to do is that they need to take the technical people, keep them in the technical job, and compensate them well, and take the people that might not be technically apt but have the people skills and the leadership skills to then lead and manage people. and compensate them well as well. So psychological safety, good people management, and pay people well as well. Remuneration is also very, very important. A work environment where interpersonal relationships are built on mutual respect. You're not going to like everybody you worked with. There's a few people I've worked with where I'm like, you're not my favorite person. I'm not going to, be having a margarita with you after work because why? However, because the relationship was built on mutual respect, we might have not liked each other. Our personalities might have not been like kumbaya, let's be friends forever. But because there was mutual respect, we were able to do that. Because when there is disharmony, conflict, harassment in the workplace, that's when you erode psychological safety and you're creating, an environment where mental health issues will develop. Also, workload, right? I know people are like, oh, we have a high performing team, high pressure. No, 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 no. Yeah, great. But that can't be constant. People can't be
Mm.
working in a high pressure, high stress environment 365 days of the year. So people need to have time where yes, work will demand of you, but also there'll be time where there's enough time for downtime and for people to decompress and focus on other things as well, so that elusive work life balance. But as I always say, work life balance just means that of all the balls that you're juggling, there'll be one that takes priority, but it doesn't take priority forever. There's an equal managing of those particular priorities. So maybe for this particular couple of days, maybe for a month, work is just high pressure, da, 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 da. But then you're able to come back from that and then maybe focus on your social life, etc., 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 etc. So that's what balance means. Because well, for
Yeah.
me, I think, yeah.
One of our other guests, Phyllis Williams-Schroeder, or the Ghetto Country grandmother, she talks about
Mm-hmm.
juggling instead of
Mm-hmm.
balance because of, like, just as you demonstrated now, you kind of rotated. There's something that's at the top, but it's not at the top forever. And like
100%.
when you're at home or when you're with your family, that work stuff shouldn't be the top priority in that moment, and it kind of
Yes.
shifts as the day goes by, as the week goes by, and as life kind of goes by. Uh, because like if even like my mom's at the age where she's about to retire, and so that's
Uh-huh.
kind of those conversations are happening a lot,
Yeah.
and just thinking about, like, let's say you're someone who just prioritized your work the entire time, and it was
Yeah.
like all hustle and nothing else. Like once you
Yeah.
retire, like there is nothing else. Your social group was at work, like your whole life was work. So it's important to kind of um, make sure that all those other building blocks are also in place, which is great.
100%. 100%. And I love that analogy. You are juggling, and and there's that rotation and there's that changeover depending on where life is at that particular moment in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us
Yeah.
about a big win you have had recently.
Oh, goodness. This is going to be such a weird one, but I was asked to come back to be a keynote speaker for a pharma company, again for their Women's Day event. And that for me was a big win because they're trusting me to have a conversation with their people. And they asked me once, which I thought, oh, that's a bit of a fluke. But when somebody asks you to come back again, then it's like, oh, okay, maybe I got this
It's
down a
okay.
little bit. But yeah, for me, that was a really, really big win that I recently had. And it was just a way for me to champion women in the workplace, but just champion women in general, and also make these Women Day events about what they really should be. I'm not against the fluff, but I also just think that it's important for us to actually address the issues that need to be addressed, and also use it as a way for women to look inwardly, because I think what tends to happen is that we tend to want to project it outwardly, but not like also look inwardly about what we can do for ourselves, yeah, so that was a big win for me.
So what are some of those areas you think need to be addressed?
I think, what we need to do is that we need to realize that if we want to talk about women empowerment, I believe that women we are empowered, right? We're just devalued. So we need to find value in ourselves and value in others like us as well. And that's where the empowerment will come from. And I also think that we need to champion one another, right? What tends to happen in women's circles, we do it very well, on the 9th of August, where we're like, kumbaya, we love each other. But are we but are we really, really advocating for women in our private spaces? I say women are lonely at the top because you're not bringing anybody else along there with you. You're just standing there by yourself to be like, oh, look what I've been able to achieve. But are we really, really actively, as women, actively trying to champion for other women to come join us at the top?
That is so powerful. And I think I mentioned the girl boss thing earlier, and that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the critiques that that entire movement and era had, where it was like supposed to be on the surface. It was all
Mm-hmm.
women empowered, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm the girl boss, I can do whatever I want. But on the other side, if you looked at some of those, the biggest girl bossy
Mm.
brands, there wasn't a lot of empowerment in
Or
there. It was
valuing of
just,
one another.
yeah. And it was more just like, well, they've empowered themselves, but not necessarily even the women within their organizations. And how on earth is that even different
Yeah,
from
and if we're being
a
completely
man
frank,
boss?
and if we're being completely frank, a lot of those things were also like they were actually not being the best people leaders of women either. So,
Yeah. So, in your
yeah.
ideal world, let's paint a
Mm-hmm.
picture for a brighter, better South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe future generations will listen to this. What would
If you're
be,
listening, I promise we will.
what would it look like for women empowerment, where like a women empowerment movement or an empowered South Africa where women are not lonely at the top and are championing one another? What would that look like? Maybe it's too broad of a question.
It would be women's safety, number one, at the top, being able to not live in South Africa as a woman and be afraid for your safety. Number two, it would be placing, and that's where I say the value of women for me is at the crux, is when we value women and we see women as valuable beings. That's what it would look like. And it would also look like women being able to do whatever it is that they want to do. Not every woman wants to be a girl boss, entrepreneur, executive, and there's so much pressure around doing that. Maybe you just want to be a stay-at-home mom and look after your family and contribute to society in that particular way. Or maybe you just want to be, you don't have executive level dreams. You're happy in your wherever you're at because it gives you a good balance between, you know, having a career that you love and enjoy, but also building a family that you can actively be a part of. Because let's be realistic. The reason I hope men don't come for me, when I say this, but the reality is the reason why men excel better at 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 executive level is because most of them are married and married to somebody who stays home and looks after the home, right? But when you are a woman at that level, you and your partner are probably quite high up. So you're doing that, but you and then what must can happen to the home kind of situation. So I think for me, as South Africa, where women are valued as human beings and can be exactly who they want to be, use their agency and the resources afforded to realize who Kulani is supposed to be. That for me that is the dream.
That is a beautiful dream. Um, and yeah, that's a beautiful dream. And I hope that it
Thank
does
you.
come true, that in the future
What's
we'll
yours,
have.
Robyn? I know you're the one asking the question, but what's yours? Share yours with me.
I think it's similar. It's just
Yeah.
like the fact that it's 2024 and the idea of like women being treated as human beings. And there's like, I don't like getting into all the stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
like there's so much opinions and fighting over women and women in their bodies, and like legislature being made about all that stuff. And I know that nations need to do things to protect their people, because like
Mm.
that's like they need to make rules so that their citizens
Mm-hmm.
are safe. Um,
Yeah.
but just the idea that like because of that, society as a whole starts kind of attacking like
Mm.
just the female person, um and and all of that. Like my dream would be for that to, for like you said, where a woman can just like exist, and in her existing she is enough, and she is valuable as the next human being, and her yes is
100%.
as valuable as the next human beings, and her voice is as valuable as someone
Mm.
else's. And
And her
like
no is
that.
as complete as any sentence would
Yes,
be.
yes. And her
Yeah.
no is all of that. Like
Mm.
yeah, that is my dream. um and my dream is that like young girls can just be, they can play
Mm.
baseball or play, I'm saying baseball, goodness. But they can do whatever they want, they can study whatever they want, they can dream about being whatever, like
Yeah.
like you
And it
said, like
shouldn't be
it kind
women
of
in STEM.
aligns
It
very
should
much
just
that
be
way.
STEM.
Someday we'll get there.
Yeah, I agree. I
But
agree.
I get the moves. Like I understand
Mm.
the reason for the marketing and the reason for the framing, because like when it started out it was just STEM, and then there was a lack of just like women there. And the ones who were
Mm.
there weren't being treated nicely. So in order to get more
Yeah,
girls there, you need to kind of
yeah.
have that marketing, and then it needs to reach a place where it's like, okay, we can drop
The women in
the
STEM, and it's just back to STEM.
and it's just back to STEM where it becomes, but that all of that, like it takes time, and it
It does.
takes sometimes generations, and it takes like male nurses even. Now they're just nurses,
Nurses,
where
yes,
once upon a
yes. My
time.
mom actually used to train nurses, and she had a lot of, we had, a sizable male enrollment, if that makes sense, which was pretty cool, I thought.
Yeah. uh my dog wants attention.
Leave your doggy alone. It's fine.
So yeah, my dog wants attention, so I'm going to cut it there. It was very lovely speaking to you. I actually wanted to get into some more stuff, about like being a mom with your, speaking a bit about like agency
Hmm.
and neurodiversity and things like that.
Hmm.
But perhaps we can do that on another time.
Send
At
me
another
another
time.
invite. I'm available. We can definitely have a conversation. It would be awesome.
Okay. Well, it was lovely having you, Kulani. And to all you listeners, I will probably tell you what to do once my dog stops barking.
Goodness, leave your doggy alone. Thank you so much for having me, Robyn.
You're most welcome.